You are bored right now. Maybe not at this exact moment, but sometime today, or yesterday or earlier this week, you felt it. That restless, hollow, slightly uncomfortable feeling of having nothing that feels worth doing. And your first instinct was probably to make it stop, to pick up your phone, to find something to watch, to eat something, to do anything, because boredom feels like a problem that needs to be solved. But what if it is not a problem? What if boredom is one of the most important signals your brain has ever developed? And what if the way most people respond to it is one of the most costly mistakes of modern life? Let's start with what boredom actually is, because most people confuse it with laziness, or emptiness, or simply having nothing to do. But boredom is none of those things. Boredom is a specific emotional state that researchers define as the aversive experience of wanting to engage in satisfying activity but being unable to do so. Notice what that means. Boredom is not the absence of desire, it is the presence of desire without direction. You want to be doing something meaningful. You just cannot find what that something is, and that gap between wanting and finding is where boredom lives. Now here is the first surprising thing about boredom. It is not a modern problem. Ancient Roman philosophers wrote about it. Medieval monks described a spiritual state they called acedia, a profound listlessness and inability to care that would be recognizable to anyone who has spent a Sunday afternoon feeling vaguely dissatisfied without knowing why. But what has changed is the environment around boredom. For most of human history, boredom was something you had to sit with. There was no alternative, no screen to pick up, no feed to scroll, no instant entertainment available at the touch of a finger. You had to be bored, and in being bored, something happened. Your brain, denied external stimulation, turned inward. It wandered, and that wandering produced something remarkable. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. When your brain is not focused on a specific task, it does not go quiet. It activates a different system entirely, a network of brain regions that becomes more active during rest. Mind wandering and, yes, boredom. And what does this network do? It processes the past. It imagines the future. It connects ideas that were previously unconnected. It is where empathy is developed, where self-reflection happens, where creative insight is born. The default mode network is essentially the brain's creative and reflective engine, and it runs on boredom. When you immediately pick up your phone the moment boredom arrives, you are not solving a problem. You are interrupting a process. You are shutting down the engine before it can run. Psychologist Mann at the University of Central Lancashire has spent years studying boredom and creativity. In one of her most striking experiments, she asked participants to do a boring task, copying numbers from a phone book, before completing a creative task. The bored group significantly outperformed the control group on creative measures. Being bored made people more creative, not because boredom is pleasant, but because boredom forces the mind to look inward for stimulation, and looking inward is where creativity lives. But creativity is not the only thing boredom produces. Boredom is also one of the brain's most important motivation signals. When you are bored, your brain is telling you something specific. What you are currently doing is not meaningful enough. This is not a small message. It is the brain's way of pushing you toward something better, toward growth, toward purpose, toward the things that actually matter to you. The person who never allows themselves to be bored never receives this signal. They are always distracted, always stimulated, always entertained, and always slightly disconnected from the deeper question of what they actually want their life to be about. Philosopher Bertrand Russell, writing nearly a century ago, argued that the capacity to endure boredom was essential for a good life, that a life without boredom was a life of constant external stimulation, which produced not happiness but a kind of permanent restlessness, a need for more stimulation that could never quite be satisfied. Sound familiar? The modern world has essentially industrialized the elimination of boredom. Every moment of potential boredom is now filled. Waiting rooms have screens. Elevators have music. Commutes have podcasts. The spaces between things, which were once where the mind did its most important work, have been colonized by content, and the result, paradoxically, is not more satisfaction, it is less. Researcher Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia ran a now famous experiment where he asked people to sit alone in a room with their thoughts for 6 to 15 minutes. No phone, no book, no music, just themselves and their minds. The results were remarkable. Most people found it deeply unpleasant. Some found it so uncomfortable that when given the option to give themselves mild electric shocks rather than continue sitting quietly, they chose the shocks. They preferred pain to their own thoughts. This is what happens when a brain that evolved to handle boredom is never allowed to practice it. The tolerance atrophies. And boredom, which was once a manageable and productive signal, becomes something terrifying. So what is the alternative? The research points to something simple and deeply counterintuitive. Sit with your boredom. Not forever, not with suffering, but with enough patience to let the default mode network do what it was designed to do, to let the mind wander, to let the ideas connect, to let the signal from boredom deliver its message about what you actually want. The most creative people in history were not the ones who were always busy. They were the ones who understood the value of doing nothing. Isaac Newton developed his theory of gravity during a period of enforced isolation when Cambridge University closed due to plague. Darwin took long walks with no purpose. Einstein described his greatest insights as arriving, not during work but during moments of idle thought. Boredom is not the enemy of productivity. It is the source of it. Your brain is not broken when it is bored. It is working. And the next time you reach for your phone to escape the discomfort of having nothing to do, consider the alternative. Put it down, wait, and see what your brain does when you finally give it the space to do what it was built to do. You might be surprised by what arrives there. Is one more dimension to boredom worth understanding. Not everyone experiences it the same way. Psychologists have identified what they call boredom proneness, a stable individual difference in how frequently and intensely people feel bored. People who are highly boredom prone tend to have more difficulty finding meaning in everyday activities. They are more likely to seek external stimulation constantly, and they are significantly more likely to engage in impulsive and risky behavior. Not because they are reckless people, but because their tolerance for the discomfort of boredom is lower. Boredom proneness has been linked to depression, anxiety, addiction, and even aggression, not because boredom causes these things directly, but because the strategies people use to avoid boredom, constant stimulation, numbing, distraction, often create their own problems. The person who cannot tolerate boredom is the person who is most controlled by it. And the person who can sit with boredom, who can allow the discomfort to pass without immediately eliminating it, has access to something the constantly distracted person does not: their own mind, their own creativity.